Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Ammar Elm, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to have Carl Grant III, the founder and CEO of Rainmakers Group. This is a business development consulting firm, and with over 25 years of experience in professional services, Carl has been instrumental in driving significant revenue growth at firms like Price Waterhouse Coopers and Cooley LLP. At Rainmakers Group, Carl and his team provide comprehensive solutions to optimize marketing and business development, deliver executive search services, offer business development training and coaching, and facilitate valuable connections to drive growth and enhance performance. Long story short, he does a lot of different things. Carl, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good to have you. I always like to start from the beginning of the inception of the company. So take us back to before you started Rainmakers Group. What were you doing at the time? And then what was the motivation behind starting the company?
So I was an entrepreneur coming out of grad school. Most of my classmates went off to join middle management positions in big companies, and I decided to launch a business with my dad. And we had a little bit of success here and there. We didn't get the whole business that we were looking to do. We were looking to launch a cable television network at the time up and running. And so that was a great first entrepreneurial experience. I
Yeah.
then joined a larger company, a startup within a larger company, and then they got acquired. My company got acquired, and I needed to move on because my team was being displaced through the acquisition. And so I started into economic development. I've had 3 economic development roles, which were great platform positions. And this is laying the groundwork for this, right? Because those kind of positions, I was managing the capital attraction program for a jurisdiction, and we doubled the number of venture capital firms in that jurisdiction. And that caught the attention of a lot of folks in the market because it was something new, it was different. And Price Waterhouse and Coopers were the 2 largest accounting firms merging to create the largest professional services organization in the world.
Okay.
And I was the very first business development hire in that firm. And
Wow.
it was one of those situations where that kind of role didn't exist. This is back in 1998, a long time ago. And the guy who hired me said, it's like I'm leading you into a dark room and I'm not showing you the way out and I'm not giving you a flashlight. And so I had to figure out how to do business development in a professional services organization when it hadn't been done before. And that was the point at which I realized it would have been nice to know how to do this before going to do it, but I did it and I was very successful at it. Did a couple
Yeah.
of other entrepreneurial ventures after that, venture backed. And in fact, I was on the management team in the first company to put video over the internet. But then, my wife and I, we have 5 children, and startups weren't the best thing for me to be doing while we were raising 5 kids because they get acquired, they go out of business, the startup world. And so my wife wanted more stability. And so I joined Cooley. The firm, it's a huge law firm today, but they only had 310 million in revenue when I joined. When I left 20 years later, they had over 2 billion in revenue. And that was a Herculean effort. It was something that got the attention of others in the industry because of what we did. It was very dramatic, and we ate their lunch, to be honest with you. So that was the genesis for me launching Rainmakers Group. And what I found as I was thinking about transitioning out of that role was that there was a pent up demand to know how I did what I did back in that role. And so I started doing consulting assignments. In fact, before I even left Cooley, it was a guy who heard a podcast that I had done. I had a podcast called Rainmakers Business Development Podcast, and I would interview others who had done great things, not necessarily in law or accounting, but in real estate and insurance, all banking, all different industries, guys that were known and women who are known for generating extraordinary amounts of business in their respective
Yeah.
fields. And folks listened to that. And then I got a call saying, we're going to launch a training program for our people. And the first one, they were going to hire one of my guests to do it. And I said, I'm thinking about doing this myself. And so they hired my guest and they hired me.
Yeah.
And so I realized then that there was a market for this. So I developed training materials and I started delivering the training. And then I started getting assignments to come into companies and other firms, other AmLaw 50 law firms, where I would write business plans. I would train their people. I would help them execute those plans. And that was the genesis of it, right? And so I've been now doing this for 3 years, and I had a number of clients. I've got all my past clients listed, current and past clients listed on my LinkedIn. And in addition to doing that, I also told you that I was dealing a lot with investors. And so
Yeah.
I set up another company called Capital Raise that I developed with my son. And so what we did was we took all of those investor contacts that I had developed over 25 years, built a software platform around them so that we could better route businesses that were a fit for those investors. And so we
Yeah.
selectively help entrepreneurs raise capital as well. That's it's a separate business, and it's something I do with my son. Totally different than
Yeah.
Rainmakers.
Very cool. But it sounds like they're synergistic in a sense, in
In
terms of there
in
could be
essence,
overlap.
yeah, yeah. Because in these professional services companies that I go into, we're still meeting companies that need to raise capital. And in one of the engagements I had, I did a light amount of capital raising assistance as part of bringing companies on to that new firm's platform. But then if they wanted extensive help, that's not a free service. Usually it takes more than a dozen referrals these days to get funded. It used to, back in the day, it used to take a dozen referrals and you can get a company funded. But nowadays you got to dig deep to get companies
Yeah.
funded. It takes a lot of work.
100%. So walk us through today to give the listeners more context around Rainmakers Group. Who's your ICP? Who do you love to work with? And then what are the different offers and services that you provide?
Yeah, so I like large companies. Professional services organizations are the best, but companies can work too. So I've got a company that I was helping with some outsourced corporate development work, where a company's looking to do M&A, looking to get acquired, looking to acquire others. The consistent theme is relationships, right? It's where it's really hard to reach out to somebody cold and start cold. And because I've been in the market for over 25 years, and I know a lot of the C-suite players, I know a lot of the investors. Typically, I have relationships at companies, whether it be at an executive level or at a board level or at a service provider level. And so I'm able to get easier access into those decision makers that a company just going cold at somebody would have a hard time doing. So I accelerate the process, whether it's raising money, developing business, getting acquired, or acquiring others.
Got it. Say that one more time just for the listeners. Developing business, raising money, acquiring others, or getting acquired.
Or even hiring key people, which I do that. It's not like a core offering it, but if somebody calls me up and says, I want to hire a head of HR or a CFO or a VP of sales, chances are I know those people, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen who executes in the market and who doesn't. And I can make some calls and find good performers. And so
Hmm.
I don't do a ton of those, but when I do them, they're high impact.
Yeah. So let's say I'm listening to this and I find this interesting. Is there some sort of typical client engagement in terms of if we start working together, this is typically what it looks like? Or is it very custom tailored depending on the individual and the context?
It's custom tailored unless they're looking for something I've done before that
Got
has some similarities. And so if I've done a training program for another professional services organization, I've got modules developed. I might tweak those modules and adapt them
Yeah.
to a particular organization. For example, the first engagement I did was an investment, a large investment banking firm.
Yeah.
And then the next one I did was a law firm. It's a little different. You know, a lot of the principles are the same, but I change it a little bit for the audience. And it's a lot different when I'm delivering training to 250 people in a large room versus a dozen people in a small room. I prefer the smaller room, to be honest with you, because you can engage with the individuals, you can ask questions, and I really like to get inside the heads of the people I'm training. For
Mm.
example, do you consider yourself an extrovert or an introvert? Or a combination of both. I'm a combination of both, believe it or not. I've got my extroverted moments. I can turn it on when I'm done being on. I shut it off and I withdraw into myself. And so I understand both. And I'm married to an introvert. And so I can adapt training towards introverts or extroverts depending on what the makeup of those individuals are in the room. And so
Got
I've done everything from the training to one-on-one or group coaching, or if I'm writing a business plan for an organization to execute, no two business plans are going to be the same. Some of the concepts are the same. If one firm is focused on early stage corporate clients and another firm is focused on, in fact, one of my clients is focused on high-end IP litigation clients.
Mm,
It's a whole different universe of people. And so the engagements are completely different. The audiences are different. The go-to-market strategy is completely different.
yeah. I appreciate you breaking that down. One thing that we think about on this, or that we like to discuss on this podcast, is the idea of having a scalable fulfillment model, especially when you're in the consulting space. Like I talked to an individual yesterday, and they were doing a lot of one-on-one, and they expressed frustrations with, "Hey, it's great, but there's only so much time in the day that you have. It's
Yeah.
hard to really scale that." So with you, given that it's custom tailored to each individual, and I understand there's frameworks and it can be the messaging in terms of how you deliver it is adjusted towards the audience. But when you think about scalability of your consulting firm and bringing on more customers, what is your perspective on that and how do you approach scalability?
Yeah, so talk scalability is kind of a funny issue. I had an entrepreneur approach me once who wanted to scale her business. She had a body painting business, and I said that has got to be the least scalable business of anything I've ever heard
Yeah.
because she's painting people to do like NASCAR events and alcohol launch events and things of that nature. And so there's a certain place where that's desired. And then I said it's really hard if you could do it once and sell it an infinite number of times, kind of like software. I said that would be ideal. Is there a way you can create tattoos out of these things? Because the same question you're asking me, I was dealing with for somebody else. And so I've dealt with these same issues. And so I have created an online training course on Thinkific.
Okay.
And that's a much it's a right now it's I have an introductory price of $99 and you can subscribe and listen to my training via video, and they're like 3 to 10 minute modules depending on the topic. And I haven't I've done almost 20 of them so far. I'm going to do 40 of them, so it's going to be a nice course that scales. It's a lower dollar amount. I'm not going to get rich on 99 bucks a subscriber unless I've got millions of them. But when you're doing it in a high-end corporate setting for either a group or individuals, that you charge a premium for that because they're bringing you on location. You're spending time with high performing individuals. These attorneys, they will bill out $1,500 to $2,000 an hour. These are folks that are taking time out of their very busy billable schedule to spend it with me. And if you're taking time away from billing $1,800 an hour to spend it with me, you're not going to want to buy training from the low cost provider. You're going to
Yeah.
want a high end trainer. And for those situations, those kind of folks aren't going to sit down and watch videos and take quizzes. They're going to want to have their hands held. They're going to want to have one-on-one attention. And then they're going to want, when they're developing their personal business plans, they're going to want somebody who's done this for 25 years
Yeah.
to look at what they're doing and say, here's some ways you can do this better. And so I can't do that on a one-to-many video platform.
Yeah. When you think about customer acquisition, client acquisition, bringing in more leads through the door for these higher end services, what does that look like for you? How do you actually generate your leads?
So a lot of that comes through referrals, right? A lot of it comes from existing relationships and referrals. There's a little bit of outbound marketing, but that outbound marketing is really to folks who I already know. Or
Okay.
in the case of my consulting, I have partnerships with other consulting organizations that have relationships at the highest levels, and they will sell into those organizations, and then I draft in behind them. And so in the case of one of these firms, there's another firm that I work with called Oxford Strategic Legal Advisors. And it was a gentleman I worked with at Cooley for a while. I actually reported to him for a while. He was the acting chief marketing officer in addition to the chief strategy officer. And so great relationship with him. And he knows the chairman of the law firms. And so he's able to sell in at a very high level. And then I come in and I support him on those. And it's not a one size fits all, but a lot of it is relationship based.
Yeah. Do you find that that could bring a consistent flow of leads? And really, the reason that I ask is because another thing that we discuss, obviously, is the importance of having predictable lead generation in place. A lot of times people mention referrals, word of mouth, and it's definitely the best form of leads. Obviously, it's the highest intent, highest no trust factor. but it's not always the most predictable. So I guess when you think about that, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, look, so when you start out on your own
Yeah.
doing a consulting business, when I was in a big firm, so go back to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 165,000 employees at the time in 156 countries, huge
Mm,
firm. I would sell something and then I wouldn't have any service delivery. I might have some relationship maintenance responsibilities, but in terms of service delivery, we had a huge firm to deliver those services. Same in the law firm is what wasn't as big, but there were lawyers to deliver those services. I would do some of the value added stuff, some of the introductions and so forth. But it was a lot easier to sell something and then hand it off and then go sell something else.
yeah.
So in this business, I have to sell it and then I have to service it. And I have
Yeah.
to invoice it and I have to collect. It was eye-opening because I never had to do any of that. In fact,
Yeah.
I didn't even have to worry about my own cybersecurity, any of that stuff. And so when you get out on your own, you realize, oh wow, I don't have a big $2 billion organization to back me up and to do all these things for me. I got to figure out how to do this. In some cases, I have folks that help me with these things. Thank goodness I married an accountant and she does my accounting, and I've raised some good kids. So it's nice when you have a family that you can do that with, but I've had to reach outside of the family as well. And so I have experimented with other types of lead generation, LinkedIn outreach, LinkedIn ads. I've experimented with all these things. And I've gotten subscribers to the business development training, people that I don't know, which is pretty cool. And I'd like to start to get to know these folks. So I'm now toying with how to do webinars that are
Yeah.
interactive with groups. And I'm going to start maturing that
Cool.
model. And then as you have these groups and they get together, that's a good way for the word of mouth to travel through existing customers. Inside those big service organizations, you find that the best source of business is existing customers, right? Either to buy more services or to refer their friends and counterparts in. And so I try to keep that concentric circle moving out by doing an excellent job with existing clients and then taking referrals from those clients. And then when they refer companies, even if it's not a really good fit, I just don't say not a good fit. Sorry.
Yeah.
I take the time, I listen to them. If somebody took the
Yeah.
time to refer me something, I'm going to try to see what it is that's unique about this business. And if indeed there's a way I can help, whether it's from the capital raising side or from the consulting side.
Cool. Sounds like you're open to new paths aside from just networking and referrals.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have started experimenting with there's software programs that you can use to do lead gen that will operate on top of your LinkedIn, on top of your contacts and so forth. There's three of them out there I'm experimenting. One of them using, I don't want to mention the names right now because I'm jury's still out on these things, but I've got two others that I've got scheduled training programs with. And so
Cool.
absolutely, whenever somebody gets to me, I'm like, and how did we meet? And then they tell me, oh, I was using this program to do lead gen. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
write that
Yeah,
down because if it got to me, that means I can get to others with it because I've got a pretty tough screen. I just don't take cold
yeah,
outreach. But if somebody figured out how to break through all the clutter and get on my calendar, then how they did it is something I want to know.
yeah. I like that. When you think about your vision and where you want to take the company, let's say over the next 12 months, are there any specific revenue targets, performance targets, priorities? Paint me that picture.
Yeah, there are. And so one of the things we're doing are these roundtable events that are, so there was a gentleman named Bill Flannery who passed away last year, but I had the opportunity to meet this gentleman before he passed away through a headhunter friend of mine who told me this guy, Bill, was the grandfather of law firm business development. He was doing training courses back before business development was even a thing, and he was training partners on how to do it. And he had a unique way of doing it where he would bring in the buyers of their services and actually create a safe space before there were even safe spaces, right? For the attorneys to hear from potential buyers of their services and to be able to interact with them in a safe space and try various tactics that they would use when they're trying to win a new client and get feedback real time from those potential buyers. Not
Yeah,
in a space where they're going to lose business or anything, but where they're going to get honest feedback. And so when you do those types of roundtable events at firms and you have Rainmaker partners coming in to do those courses, then you really get the mindset and the mind share of those professionals. And if they like what they're getting from you, that leads to training opportunities. It leads to coaching opportunities. It leads to outsourced business development opportunities where I could go in and I can do, we call it like the outsource growth officer, if you will, right? Where you're coming in and you're not taking anybody's job, but you're guiding them on how to grow the business, whether it's geographically or by
Okay.
industry or by practice group. And that's not something that everybody knows out there when they're going to market because they haven't really thought about it before. But I did it for over 20 years, so I know what these things look like. So yes, I want to scale this thing tremendously, but you got to do it smart.
Yeah, for sure. What do you feel like is the biggest challenge you're facing right now?
I think the biggest challenge is that in a large firm, clients would come and go. But when you've
Yeah.
got a client base of thousands of clients, a client coming or going or pausing, it didn't really impact the business that much because it was just the course of how things. When you have a small firm and your anchor client wraps up an engagement, even if you did a great job, it could be you helped a company launch an office. I had one client that wanted to open up an Austin office, and they had a handful of people when I started, and now they're full. The office is completely self-sustaining and full and bursting at the seams. That's success, right? But what
Mm.
happens when you're successful in this business is you wrap up a client engagement. So your reward for being successful is
Getting
thank you
fired.
so much, great job. We don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
can be rough because then when you're a small business, you got to replace that anchor client. So that is a challenge is when you have too much of a customer concentration with
Yeah.
an anchor client and that anchor client wraps up, then you got to find clients to replace that. And so it's like a constant treadmill, which can be
Like
challenging.
for sure. It's like balancing business development with client fulfillment, client success, right, juggling all these balls in the air. It's a lot.
Yeah, I wish that the client development piece of this were automated. Then I could
Yeah.
just teach people how to do the client development. But instead, I actually have to go do my own client development.
Yeah, for sure. So walk us through. I'm gonna throw a couple closing lightning round questions at you. And don't think too much, just the first thing that comes to mind. What's one tool or resource has been a game changer for you in business?
Technology. I had to think about that for a second because when I say technology, it's broad, right?
Yep.
That technology includes social media, it includes podcasts, it includes AI, includes a combination of all those things, right? Because if you don't master technology, it'll pass you by. And I'll use an example. I remember when I got out of grad school, and you already know when I started my career. So email was a thing in the early 90s, but
Yeah.
it was within colleges, right? So if you were in graduate school in the 90s, you were using email. In fact, you were using like internal forms of the internet back
Yeah.
then. And then I got out and nobody
Yeah.
was on email. In fact, nobody was on the web. And I'm like, whoa, like we were more
Yeah.
advanced back at school. And so I remember getting in my car. This is going to sound funny. I got in my car and I drove to an internet service provider to get my email. I actually got in my car and drove to get a freaking email address. And it was a novelty back then. And I
Yeah.
remember like really successful businessmen saying, I don't do email. I'm like, dude, what do you mean you don't do email? What are you going to send a fax?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the first technology change. And then internet came, like the
Yeah.
web. And people started moving to doing stuff over the web and doing e-commerce and stuff. And I just feel like, oh, they would poo-poo that. And I'm like, once again, dinosaur behavior. And then cell phones and location-based services became a thing. And people didn't want, they were worried about their privacy and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then social media became a thing, right? And I had guys saying, I don't do social media. Once again, I'm like, you're going to be a dinosaur. And then the same type of mindset says, I don't do AI. I don't trust it. I hate to say it, you're being left in the dust, right? And I don't know what's coming next, but something's coming next. And so
For
I'm
sure.
always an early adopter in any of these technological breakthroughs that happen. Podcasting, I was an early podcaster. All
Awesome.
of these things are very useful and helpful, and you've got to constantly be adapting and adjusting what you do.
I love that. I love that. I think people should go back and listen to that story again because we're living through that right now. There's a lot of business owners that are not quick to adopt AI, And they're slow to even have the mentality to know that this is something that they need to be on top of. And then from there, slow to implement and to actually use these tools. I think ChatGPT Pro subscription is like paying for hydro at this point. It's a necessity. It's like you have to have this in your life in some way, shape, or form.
It
Because
is, it is, it is. But you also have to have knowledge that bypasses Chat GPT,
yeah.
because Chat GPT screws up all the time.
Oh,
And
it's
unless
ridiculous.
you're smart
Ridiculous.
enough to
Yeah.
know, like I'm trying to get an FDA approval for another company that I'm involved with,
Yeah.
and I've done 2 rounds of submissions using
Yeah.
Chat GPT, and both of them have been shot down. And I
Mm.
know the third strike, I'm out. And so now I'm like, okay, ChatGPT is useful to a point, but then you've got to go back and you've got to say, okay, I'm going to take everything that ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and all these other AI programs out there can give me, but then I'm going to sit down with all of those outputs and I'm going to apply my brain to what I'm
Yep.
doing. And I think even though ChatGPT can reach out to a more vast amount of resources, it doesn't always get it right. And so
Yeah.
you've got to be so attuned to ChatGPT and all the other AIs where you're second guessing it and you know what its limitations are.
I love that. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Probably, I'll give my email address. I don't mind it. It's carl@rainmakersgroup.io.
Yep.
You can find me at Carl Grant III on LinkedIn,
Awesome.
but don't just send me a cold LinkedIn and not say, I heard you on a podcast or something. Say, tell me how you're connecting with me, or find me at carl.grant.iii on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there
Awesome.
as well.
Awesome. Carl, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I really
you. It's been a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Me as well. So that wraps up another insightful episode of Founders Future. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're looking to scale your business and really enhance your sales and marketing efforts, visit closers.io to discover how we can support your growth journey. Until then, keep on climbing.